A Strange New Worlds episode packed with hidden clues, surprising connections to Q and Trelane, and twists you might have missed. Let's dive into the details and what it could mean for the season ahead. Hey everyone, I'm Nick and welcome back to Sci-Finatics. Well, today we're talking about Strange New Worlds Season 3 Episode 2, which is Wedding Bell Blues. This is a bit of a quirky episode, a bit of a comedy episode we've got this time around, featuring none other than New Zealand actor Rhys Darby, who I'm a massive fan of. Even though he's not mentioned by name, let's face it, it's Trelane. We pretty much know this is Trelane from the original series episode Squire of Gothos. And we've also got a very interesting confirmation that despite a lot of debate over the years and everything, is Trelane a Q? We kind of got a bit of a confirmation of that, which is also a very interesting part of this episode. All this stuff we're going to go into later as part of my review. So let's get right into talking about Wedding Bell Blues. Everything that happened in the episode, we'll break it down and talk about it. Let's get into that now. So we start off with a 3-month time jump from episode 1. They've been in repairing the Enterprise and everything after that big battle with the Gorn. And we actually have an anniversary of the Federation. It's the founding of the Federation, centenary celebrations, and there's some celebrations and so forth going on at Starbase 1. The Enterprise is hosting, and it seems like Chapel has been away for her 3-month period doing her fellowship with Dr. Corby, and she's just going to be returning to the Enterprise very, very soon. We get a scene with Spock salsa dancing with Latta. It's a nice scene. I was kind of a little surprised. Latta is so hard as nails kind of character. You kind of don't feel like she would be necessarily into salsa dancing or dancing of any kind. I kind of feel like this is something that Christina Chong is very proficient at, and they've written it into her character because she can do it. I guess the other question is, does it really suit La'an's character for her to be this way inclined? But at least they wrote into the script that she wanted to be a ballerina when she was a girl, and obviously the Gorn put a stop to any ballerina plans when that event happened in her life. But that being said, she looks like a pretty good dancer, as opposed to someone who, technically speaking, should have the dancing ability of an 8-year-old. But let's go along with it for now. La'an's teaching Spock to dance. They're talking relationship stuff about Spock and Chapel and everything, and I guess La'an's giving him a few tips or whatever that he can kind of use to win Christine back once she arrives back on the Enterprise. In the transporter room, Scotty sees a bit of a sensor ghost there, which he dismisses out of hand, but we know that's Trelane for later on. Chapel beams back, and she's got Roger Corby in tow. We soon find out that Corby and Chapel are in fact in a relationship. They're going to be sharing quarters together, and this is a bit of a surprise to everybody. I love the scene in this transporter room. It's very suitably awkward. We've got Spock trying to give Chapel the book and Corby trying to read the book, and it's all a little bit of a comedy of errors. But I love the dynamics here between the various different characters. I think they work quite nicely as a comedic sense, and I think Killian O'Sullivan has got some good comedic chops on him. Next we get a scene with Ortegas and her brother who are sort of sparring and doing a bit of trash talk as well. Uhura enters to get the gossip on Chapel and Corby, just returning back to the Enterprise. And Uhura meets Ortegas' brother, whose name actually eluded me until I watched the episode a second time, where you blink and you'd miss his name because it's skimmed over so quickly in this episode. But his name is in fact Bilodeau. We get a scene in sickbay with Una talking to this new nurse. Obviously with Chapel being away for 3 months, they've had to replace a nurse in sickbay with this new male nurse character here, who is in fact another character whose name isn't completely apparent in this episode either. And just talking about the Illyrian blood transfusion they had to give to Batel to get her over the whole Gorn egg infestation issue. And it appears like this nurse is going to be staying on board the Enterprise and doing some extra work and stuff around, even though Chapel's returned. Batel seems to be doing well. The Gorn embryos have been absorbed into her system thanks to Una's regular blood transfusions. And Batel's been living on the Enterprise. She's been staying in Pike's quarters for the last 3 months. Her and Pike have been getting a lot closer because obviously the Cayuga got destroyed at the last episode of season 2, so she hasn't got a ship anymore, and it looks like she's in the market for a new starship. So it'll be interesting to see what starship they give Batel as a replacement for the Cayuga. I love the joke here that she makes that she's looking for a new starship, but the starship has to have pretty big quarters to hold all of Pike's hair products for when he comes to visit. I thought that was kind of a funny joke, having a little bit of a reference to his enormous hairstyle or whatever that he has. Next we get a scene with Chapel and Spock. She returns the book to him. which I guess they're not a couple anymore, and it kind of is a bit weird, so she sort of has to pass on the gift and give that back to him. And Spock kind of questions Chapel's agenda with Corby when she said she wanted to be single. She wanted to be single, she wanted them to have a break, let's be single for a while, but she's just jumped straight back into a relationship in a space of 3 months without any kind of mourning period, I guess, with Spock. So he's kind of taking a little bit of offense to that. It's like, what do you want here? Do you want to be in a relationship or do you not want to be in a relationship? Because you're just jumping from me to some other bloke pretty quickly here. And in another blink and you'll miss it moment, we do see in the background of Spock's quarters here, looking out the window to space, the face of Trelane looking in the window at Spock. It's our first appearance by Trelane in this episode, but I missed it the first time round, so it's a bit of a quick one. We get another kind of amusing scene with Ortegas' brother and Uhura kind of vibing. They're chatting away here, and Erica is kind of tripping out a little bit about them. What's going on here? Like a bit of from Sparks going on. I'm not quite sure about this situation. And in the port galley, Sam Kirk is kind of fanboying out a little bit about Corby being in the bar. He obviously is a fan of Corby's work. We've got Spock entering, and another kind of really awkward situation. There's so many of these awkward situations in this episode where they're reciting a story about Chapel's parents and mother's death and everything, and this kind of romantic story between Corby giving this gift to Chapel, and it's kind of brutal. It's like, oh, poor old Spock. It's like rubbing the salt in the wound, because he was so looking forward to seeing Christine, and now all this is going on and it's just not so good for him. Spock is sad, and we see a reflection in the bar of a Vulcan bartender serving at the bar, but when the camera pans to reveal this Vulcan bartender, we realise this Vulcan bartender isn't a Vulcan bartender at all. It's obviously actor Rhys Darby as Trelane. Trelane gives Spock this mystery cocktail, and then we get a bit of a time jump. Spock goes to bed, then he wakes up, Chapel's next to him. So it seems that they're engaged to be married. Trelane has obviously changed events, changed the timeline, so to speak. Things have shifted for his amusement. Time goes back to the start of the episode where we get Spock and Latta doing their dancing lessons that we saw at the beginning. So I like the fact that this episode kind of had a bit of a time travel aspect in it as well as being a bit of a humorous episode. And rather than being the Vulcan bartender, Trelane is now appearing to everybody as an Andorian. So this is kind of another little skew that they put in this episode to kind of get around the canon. Because obviously, if he appeared in his usual appearance, there would be probably some sort of record of him in the ship's computer in terms of the log and everything, and they would be able to link that back to Trelane. So I suppose the fact that they never refer to Rhys Darby's character as Trelane in this episode, and he's always appearing to the crew as either like a Vulcan bartender or an Andorian wedding planner, gets around that canon issue, I suppose. But from as far as what the audience is concerned, the audience is seeing him as, let's face it, Trelane. Clothes that, let's face it, aren't that dissimilar to the costume that he wore in Our Flag Means Death. So maybe his character in Our Flag Means Death kind of tipped off the producers of Strange New Worlds and thought, oh, he'd make a good Trelane. Even though they don't call his character Trelane at any point in this episode, because obviously doing so would be a bit of a break in canon, I'm just going to call him Trelane for ease of review purposes, because we know that no one can refer to him as Trelane. He can't refer to himself as Trelane because that would break canon. So that's kind of a bit of a sneaky way I think they got around not interrupting canon in this episode. So now he's a very flamboyant Andorian wedding planner. He's got human Vulcan fusion wedding snacks being brought out by Corby. And he's snapping his fingers, transforming the snacks, and we've got Chapel's mother's flowers, which are dead, and he snaps his fingers and brings them back to life. So we're definitely getting the typical hijinks of the Q. This is typical Q kind of hijinks, because we're going to find out at the end that Trelane is in fact part of the Q Continuum, which has been up for debate for many years, and now we've got a confirmation of that, but we'll get to that a bit later in the review. Trelane then says,
"Please tell me you're not going to wear that jacket on the day, Corbs."
I kind of feel like this line here might have been ad-libbed a little bit when Rhys Darby calls him Corbs rather than Corby, because nicknames like Corbs, it's a very kind of Australian New Zealand thing to sort of say, to abbreviate people's surnames and give them nicknames like this. So I kind of wonder whether that was a bit of an ad-lib on Rhys Darby's behalf. Spock witnesses Corby trying to break into his quarters, which he believes is trying to sabotage the wedding, but Corby is aware that there's been a change in the timeline. Reality has changed. He tells Spock the story of him and Chapel's courtship, and and Spock punches him out. When Corby regains consciousness, Spock now, during this heightened event, is now aware of the changes in the timeline. So we've got both Corby and Spock aware, being the only people on board the ship, aware of these changes that Trelane has made to the timeline. And they speculate this mischievous entity is responsible. And they kind of have to work together to solve this mystery, which is kind of fun because they're obviously at odds with each other a little bit at the start. Spock's not very happy about Corby's appearance here and the fact that he's kind of dating Christine now. And the fact that they have to work together to kind of solve the mystery of this entity that's playing hijinks on the ship is kind of a cool dynamic. Trelane enters, he's got a whole bunch of outfits for the wedding or whatever. And in another line of dialogue that proves he is in fact Trelane, he says,
"Greetings and many felicitations on this happiest of wedding eves."
the line of greetings and felicitations obviously is what he greeted the Enterprise in the Squire of Gothos episode on one of the screens on the bridge of the Enterprise.
Greetings and felicitations.
They enter the science lab to start scanning to see if they can work out where this entity is or what he is. Sam Kirk enters, he's got wines and everything. Spock's trying to explain to Sam, and Spock's trying to fire Sam up to punch him, to shake him out of the trance that he's in as well. So obviously it takes a very heightened emotional response to break themselves out of the spell that Trelane's put them in. They report to Pike, and apparently there's a bachelor party going on at Pike's for the wedding. Spock tries to explain the situation, obviously, and they track Trelane down to the port galley. He's in the middle of mixing a whole bunch of cocktails, and Spock IDs him as both the Vulcan bartender and the Andorian wedding planner. He rocks the ship with a snap of his fingers. So here's one of these indications that Trelane is in fact a Q, using finger snap Q-type powers. And then Spock wakes up in the bed next to Trelane. Spock's been trapped in a glass. We've got these Q-like playing tricks events going on, which is always this sort of fun Q kind of mischievous antics that he has. At the wedding, we've got Uhura and Ortegas' brother, Bilodeau, who is like a documentary filmmaker. He's flying around a camera drone and so forth, trying to get some shots and everything. And Corby is very inappropriately dressed as the maid of honour, thanks to Trelane and his pranks. It's time to get married, and Chapel enters and everything, and obviously Trelane is not only the wedding planner but also the celebrant in this particular wedding. We get the vows going on. Roger's trying to object. He's turning Corby into a bulldog as a prank. All of these quirky kind of Q-like pranks and moments and everything are always pretty fun. And I think Killian O'Sullivan does a great job of leaning into his comedic side. Spock says the wedding vows and everything, which is the poem that Corby read to Chapel, we heard earlier. And Chapel awakens from the trance that she's under via an emotional response. She is now aware of the situation. And suddenly we get Trelane going on a big rant. Big rant. And much like the end of the Squire of Gothos episode, where we see the disembodied green clouds talking to Trelane at the end of that episode, we get the space entities in the form of a big green cloud arriving at the window and talking to Trelane in exactly the same way. And who is doing the voice of Trelane's father? Well, it's none other than, of course, John Delancey, who obviously portrays Q in Star Trek. This is a pretty big confirmation that Trelane is the son of Q, and that obviously Trelane is part of the Q Continuum. We get a very, very similar ending here to the ending of Squire of Gothos. Almost identical. The fact that we have Q as the father figure in the big green cloud talking to Trelane, chastising him for being a naughty little boy, and he's doing bad pranks, and he's got to get hauled away by Dad to get a good old talking to. In another callback to Squire of Gothos, as Trelane is departing, he uses the expression,
And I believe it's pronounced tally-ho.
Tally-ho! You've all been lots of fun.
That ending, I guess, is very, very similar to Squire of Gothos. I think I would have liked to see a separate scene at the end of this episode. I think that would have been an amazing cherry on top, to see John Delancey and Rhys Darby sitting on an asteroid somewhere looking at Starbase 1 from a distance in their human form, with actually Q saying to Trelane, these humans, they're not ready for your pranks yet. Maybe another 10 years or something and you can revisit them again and see if they're worth chatting to or something, just to kind of give us a little bit of a foreshadowing to the appearance with the Enterprise again under Kirk for that Squire of Gothos episode in season 1 of original series. I guess again that might have been tricky to do, because that would have required them to do a de-aged John Delancey. They would have had to get John Delancey in. They would have had to deep fake his face or CG his face to make him appear as young as he was in Encounter at Farpoint. I guess that was an expense for the episode. It was good enough, maybe, I suppose, just for them to do the same thing as they did in the end of Squire of Gothos, and him appearing as just the disembodied voice of Q, with John Delancey voicing the character. So now we're back to Federation Day. It's not the wedding of Spock and Chapel anymore. Timelines change, events have changed. We're back to the centenary of the Federation celebrations. And we get a new bartender here. This bartender is a three-armed Adosian. Adosians we first got introduced in Star Trek in the animated series with the character of Arex, and we saw them in Lower Decks once or twice, and also in Prodigy in a background character in that as well. But this, I believe, is the first time we've actually seen a live-action Adosian in Star Trek. All of our previous Adosian appearances have always been in an animated form, so it's kind of cool that we get a first live-action shot here of an Adosian in Star Trek. We also get an appearance from one of the Rongovians that we saw from that Season 1 episode, the Spock Amok episode, where the Rongovians were looking to join the Federation, and they did, obviously, and now they're part of the celebration days here. So it's kind of also cool to see the Rongovian ambassador from Season 1 make another appearance back again in these celebrations. Chapel and Corby discuss the craziness that just ensued, and this Adosian bartender is offered a job on the Enterprise, so it looks like they're going to be a regular character. Maybe a sort of a Guinan-esque character in the port galley there on the Enterprise. Uhura and Ortegas' brother talk of the documentary that he's making, and it's kind of annoying Erica a little bit. Spock is a bit sad about the way things have developed between him and Chapel, and that Corby's kind of muscled his way in to Chapel's heart there. And I kind of feel like there's a bit of a bond forming here between Spock and Laan, maybe through the dancing lessons and just through confiding with her about his emotions and everything regarding Chapel. There's a little bit of a closer friendship forming here between Spock and Laan, so that'll be interesting to see where that goes in future episodes. We get a bit of a dance happening at the end of the episode here with the centenary celebrations to none other than Wham's Wake Me Up Before You Go Go, which is an interesting musical choice for Star Trek. I'm impartial to a bit of 80s pop from time to time. I don't mind it. Guess it fit in here. I think if Trelane had put this music on, I think maybe it would have fit in a little bit better. But the fact that they're playing 80s pop at the celebrations and particularly seeing Pike dancing to it, it's like, oh, okay. It was a little bit weird, but I guess I went with it. So yeah, Erica is in a bit of a mood. I think she's still got a bit of PTSD left over from the whole Gorn incident. She goes to Spa by herself on the punching bag and has a vision of Gorn in the window. So she hasn't quite got over her being impaled by a Gorn in the previous episode 3 months prior, and also having her hand dissolved by Gorn digestion pods or whatever as well. So she's clearly got some issues to work through. All in all, look, I really enjoy this episode. I love Rhys Darby. He's such a great guest star in this episode, and I think he's a perfect choice to play Trelane in Strange New Worlds. Fantastic that we got some Q hijinks, and the fact that we also got Q appearing in this episode as well was fantastic. Over the years, I think a lot of people have speculated the fact that Trelane was part of the Q Continuum, but people always kind of dismissed it as being, oh, well, he can't be a Q because he's using technology. He was using mind control, energy matter technology in the form of that mirror that he had, that Kirk shot out with the pistol, to create his hijinks. But I guess you put it this way, Trelane is in an infant Q or a child Q, and maybe Q used technology to help develop their infants or their children to using their powers, much like human parents maybe use those little play centres with kids with squeaky noises and bells and whistles and mirrors and crunchy things and everything to stimulate infants' physical contact with the world around them and everything. So maybe the fact that Trelane in Squire of Gothos was using technology behind his mirror is no different than human beings using kind of play toys or playthings to develop their children's minds. Maybe the Q do the same thing as for their infants and their children, just as a bit of a plaything, a bit of a play toy. So maybe that kind of explains the whole presence of technology and everything in that Squire of Gothos episode, and still means that Trelane can in fact be a Q. But what do you guys think? Leave your thoughts in the comments section. We'll get chatting about that. If you haven't subscribed to Sci-Finatics yet, please be sure to do so. Click on that big subscribe button and ring the bell and everything for notifications to stay up to date with all the latest Star Trek news on YouTube. Check out my merch in the merch store. Plenty of cool t-shirts and mugs and hoodies and caps and everything. Always at discount prices. In fact, there's still a sale going on there for 20% off. Massive bargain. Check that out before it ends on the 20th of July. And I'll be back pretty soon with another video. Catch you guys soon.